Hey, what's up, Trust Engine and Mortgage Coach community? I am interviewing Jim Deitch for the Deitch. Did I say it right? Deitch?
Deitch, yeah, you got it.
Deitch for the first time. I just recently met him, but I have been referred by multiple people. Brian Hale has said just incredible things about Jim. Who was it that finally connected us from Strathmore? Who was it that finally introduced us, Jim?
I think it was Garth.
Yeah, I think it was Garth. And then also in my interview with Bill Dallas, I mean, this guys, for the CEOs of the industry, this man is extremely well known. He's sitting on some insights that I think every lender needs to pay attention to. Jim, I want to start with, well, first of all, anything you want to share, like we have loan officers, we'll have CEOs. This is the first time in the community. Anything you want to share about your backstory before I start asking questions?
David, thank you for that. No, I've been a lender for 30 years before getting into professional services, originated, securitized, and ultimately the companies I started were purchased by regional banks, PNC, M&T, and Truist. So decided to get into professional services and really share some of the insights and knowledge that I've accumulated over time. And just a pleasure to be with you, David. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's good to have you. And by the way, guys, I just found out he's the author of a book called Strategically Transforming the Mortgage Industry. And he interviewed Billy Beane, I think he said multiple times. It was kind of funny. I came into this interview with, I want to call this Moneyball Mortgage because I want to do a whole series of interviews because I truly believe every lender right now could be winning, could be profitable. Maybe not every single lender, but the majority of lenders, if they made some very bold leadership decisions, again, bold, not easy things to do, but bold leadership things, they can be profitable today. And the decisions that they would make and that they would implement, they would actually grow faster and be more profitable going forward. Like, it's not like, oh, we got to make some bold decisions and this is going to slow us down in the future. Like, we're doing it because it's a tough market. No, you could do it and you could accelerate your success going forward. And you agree with that, right, Jim?
Absolutely. And the idea of having a sustainable business model that is profitable in all market conditions. When I talk to mortgage banking executives, they look at me and say, well, you can't do that. And the answer is you can, but you can't do it with the behaviors that we're doing as an industry today. And that's what I think we can talk about, David.
Yeah, and I know a lot of loan officers are going to watch this, guys. And some of the things we share, you're going to really like and resonate. Like, that's a great idea. And then some of you are going to be like, oh, don't know if that's such a great idea, But so here's a post I did in LinkedIn 5 months ago. I want to tee it up with this, and then we'll get into this interview. So I go, I've written about this before, but it's time for Moneyball mortgage thinking. Here's what I mean. It's time to start going beyond just production to evaluate loan officers' future performance and value to the company. It's time to start focusing on sales fitness scores because lenders and loan officers need to be more efficient and effective going forward to thrive in this new era. And I do believe, by the way, that was the article. I do believe we are in a new era of lending. Back on reading, it's time for lenders to start going deeper with the success metrics of how we use data. It's time for lenders and loan officers to become mortgage advisors, AKA mortgage coaches, to gain the most market share and to thrive in the future. So let's start drilling down on these numbers. Yes, I do believe the star performers drive growth, but our industry has become much more than that. To start creating and managing data-driven, advice-driven mortgage advisors, great conversion and less price exceptions than loan officers. So anyways, I got a little off track because I'm not a good reader out loud. I will put a link to this LinkedIn article. And Jim, I think after hearing that article that I wrote a while ago, you know why when you walked me through your presentation, I was just like, this is it. Like, we gotta share this with more people.
Awesome. Well, would you like me to share? We'll talk about it.
Yeah. You walk through some of the slides that you and I went through in the prep call, and let's just kind of give a a conversational presentation. Anyone who's watching this live, put your questions in chat. And if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, feel free to call out what you like. And if you have questions, put them down below in chat. All right, let's go.
Awesome. So, we're not going to go back to 22 volumes for a long time. This is the MBA forecast. So you can't just hold on and hope. That's not a strategy. Holding on and hoping is not a strategy, because eventually you will either run out of money, run out of grip, and you'll be heading down. And you see that already with 4 bankruptcies so far this year, lots of forced consolidations. So holding on, wishing, not a strategy. Dave, I think the strategy for MortgageBall is really to realize that 1.7 trillion we're going to get this year, that's the available revenue at reduced margin. Nothing is going to change to make more revenue. There's not enough inventory. There's no refinances to speak of. Yeah, there's some other things, but that available revenue is there. So if you're going to be profitable, you have to control the costs and make sure that the profit you want to make fits into that available revenue. If you don't do that, you will be losing money. It is not a strategy that is sustainable. I just met with 2 warehouse bank CEOs. The vast majority of their clients have had multiple consecutive quarters of lack of profitability, and that's just not a sustainable business model. So Dave, that's kind of the opening thought. How's that fit with MortgageBall?
Yeah, well, I would say, guys, and loan officers, I want you to care about how profitable you are to the organization. While there are people in the organization like the CEO, the head of production, their compensation is tied to profitability. And then, there's P&L branch lenders that are tied to profitability. Even if you're not tied to profitability, it's your value fitness score. Like if you are leading the company in the most price exceptions and you're one of the least profitable loan officers, that is a direct reflection on the value you're giving to a consumer, the experience that you're giving to a consumer, and it's a score of how you rate as a business person. Like start taking it personally, and the way future profitable loan officers that lead the company at least price exceptions, they're also delivering the most value. So I really hope that CEOs are going to like this presentation and this conversation. There'll be some loan officers that like it, some that won't. But because we are in a new era of lending, and we here at Trust Engine, we talk about financial freedom lending. The way you achieve financial freedom as a loan officer, as a company, you're profitable. We're profitable, and we're helping consumers achieve homeownership in a way that they eventually achieve financial freedom. So anyways, I just hope we really move the needle for both, the C-suite here and mortgage professionals.
So I'm going to jump into, we created a FICO score for humans. And the reason was, when you look at just volume for producers or cases for operational people, it doesn't tell the whole story. And what really tells the story is how much volume someone does. Like a FICO score has 5 or 6 different elements. But for a loan officer or a branch, it's the volume, it's the margin, it's the concessions that eat away at that revenue. It's the success at closing and complexity. So we've created a score that kind of predicts the profitability of any particular individual within a company. And I'm going to go right to the loan officer side. You'll see at the top, there's a score going across that upper tape. And right at 100 is the average for the company. So there's roughly what the average revenue being generated for that particular company came from. And this whole idea, Dave, if I might just tell a little bit of a backstory on my conversation with Billy Bean, I think that may be useful for our audience. What do you think?
Yeah, brilliant. Love stories. So
I got in touch with Billy, and we were able to put together a couple of calls. And the first thing I said is, hey, I'm Jim. I'm interested in your thoughts on the mortgage banking industry. I know you have a little bit of familiarity because you've given a couple of keynotes. Why don't we start there? He says, okay, Jimmy, I'll give you that. I said, Billy, it's Jim. He says, no, it's Jimmy. I said, only my mother calls me Jimmy. He says, well, right now I'm calling you Jimmy. So, okay, good deal. Here's what he said. The vast majority of originators in our business do not understand how or why they fit into the overall ecosphere of mortgage banking. If a lender cannot make a profit from that particular originator, then there's really not a reason for that originator to be there. But what happens is we focus just on volume and not on those other attributes. As a result, the relationship, if you looked at the volume generated by a loan officer or a branch, as opposed to the revenue. This is revenue. And when I talk about revenue, David, it's gain on sale, retained fees, less concessions, less cures, less lender credits. And what happens is 50% of the revenue comes from a very small group of producers or branches. The next 30% comes from another group, but by and large, the last 20% of the revenue comes from individuals that represent 50% or more of the people in a company. And if you, as an originator, are sitting here, you're going to have two choices. One is to figure out how to become more effective and how to become more relationship-oriented and become more of a skills-based seller, or you're going to starve to death. It's that simple. Dave, maybe that's too harsh.
Love it. And, you know, for all the loan officers listening to this, and for the leaders, I want you to start thinking, what are the, you know, like Jim's going to share some of the metrics and some of the data, but I want you to start writing down, like, if by the way, if you have not watched the movie Moneyball, it's with Brad Pitt. It is like a fantastic movie. To me, every business person, you know, should watch that movie because it's just very inspirational. You know, just most industries can improve, you know, how they play Moneyball at whatever they do, but it is really time for Moneyball Mortgage. So anyways, love that.
Awesome. And, you know, for the producers that might be listening to this, it's really important to know where you stand, because most producers tend to believe they're over in this top tier. But in reality, only a small number of producers in the top tier. And you've got to be really introspective to say, am I producing the volume? If you're asking for a lot of concessions, if you're always competing on price, there's probably something that you can learn technique-wise or professional development-wise. And Dave can probably help you a lot in this because it does make a difference on how you're perceived. And ultimately, if we're going to be at $1.7 trillion, $1.8 trillion, $1.9 trillion for the next 3-4 years, eventually companies are going to have to make decisions to deal with this bottom 50, 60% of the producers. So you still got time, but not much to really excel and move to the left. So what's that mean when you look at this particular, I'm going to take you to this chart. This is from a client. The data is anonymized, but it's actual data. So this particular lender did about 600 cases in a month. And we looked at using that methodology of top tier, middle tier, bottom tier. We isolated each individual into one of the tiers. And interestingly, $62 is what was left after the revenue came in, less all the commission costs. This is before covering overhead, compliance, secondary, et cetera. This is just what was left, which is why lenders are all, for the most part, not profitable today. But here's something that's really interesting. The top tier people produced 435 files and did it at about $2,500 of contribution profit to cover overhead, et cetera. So they made $1,064,000. The people on the bottom did 169 loans, but ended up losing $900,000 in the process. And the people in the middle kind of broke even. So if you're a lender and you're a CEO and you think about, oh, every loan, the next loan matters, it's just one more loan, even if a producer does one loan, that's true as long as all your other costs are fixed, but they're not. If you look and essentially right-size the productivity of the operational team, then it comes down to, do I have a top-tier producer, a top-tier processor, a top-tier underwriter, a top-tier closer? That gives me top-tier profit. And if not, you're going to have a really hard time making money over the next 3 years. Dave, how's that square with what you see?
Yeah, no, it squares perfectly. And, as I unpacked some of the notes I took preparing for this, I think, one of the bold decisions that executives need to make is extreme transparency and really start scorecarding and gamifying some of these metrics so that, if you're in the top tier, you're in the top tier. If you're in the bottom tier, you're in the bottom tier. What are your thoughts on that, Jim?
I think that's exactly right, but I'm going to be very candid and kind of walk through why these numbers are so different. Why is the top tier producer doing about $1,300 more in revenue per file than the bottom tier? And David, I'll give you a hint. It starts with the C and ends with an N. Can you think of the word?
I'm not going to guess. My mind's not working. What is it?
It's concessions.
Oh, well, I like that. That's so really concessions are the single largest factor.
Absolutely, because when you think about it, if you give away 1/8 of a point or 1/4 of a point in rate, you're talking about $500, $600, $1,000 or more. And the difference between the top tier and the bottom tier is largely concessions. So if you're asking for concessions in a business where in a good year, the profit on a loan, on a $300,000 loan is $1,500 in a good year, it's not that today. And you are doing this concession, you're giving away 80% of the profit of that lender on every concession you make. That doesn't work. So if you want to know why this top line is $5,500 versus $6,800, it's the concession work. And to a lesser degree, it's cures. When you look at, go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to insert, because the word well, first of all, I want to see if you could guess my word. And it's the 2 CN words that drive profitability. What's another word that comes to mind for you that if a lender really focused on lender concession and lender, another CN word, any guesses?
Go ahead.
Conversion.
Yeah.
Because here's the deal. A loan officer that has, let's just say your top quartile converters, which, by the way, lenders, everyone listen to this, these are 2 easy to measure metrics: credit report versus closed loan. What is the conversion from, hey, I had a conversation with a consumer where they trusted me enough to give me a credit report and I closed the loan? If you measured and you started delivering extreme transparency around concession and conversion, it would be game changing to profits today. And then if you manage to that, you created transparency around that, you built technology around that, you built training around that, you would kill it today and you would crush it tomorrow. Any thoughts on that?
Dave, I do have a thought, and I actually have a chart that I think would be useful. So this is an extract of a number of lenders in which we've anonymized the data, but it's generally pretty accurate. This looks at the loan funnel, and the loan funnel actually starts way up top here. And a lot of times you don't even see that loan get to the started status. So people spend time and energy up here. But once it starts on this particular group of lenders, of 10,000 loans that started, only 4,900 made it to a respite. And then people go through and say, well, we closed 3,100 loans and our conversion was 62%. Incorrect. If you look at from the top of the funnel where you just started the loan, it's 30%. If you go up to that point, even above there where you got a touch, it might be 10, 15%. So what that says is like Moneyball, our batting average is horrible simply because we let so much opportunity slip through our fingers. And if you're a CEO or an operations manager or a CFO of the lender, here's what this costs. So when you look at this and you go, okay, I didn't get RESPA apps on 4,800 files, but I pulled a tri-merge on it. I just threw $250,000 out the window. And I had people, not my loan officers who were commissioned, but I had people doing some work on this that I paid. So I lost almost $1 million simply because I let all that opportunity slip through my fingers. And it goes down with withdrawn loans. I did the credit report. I spent all of the time and energy for my operations team to get that loan to whatever status it was. I hedged it and it walked out the door because they left. And even if I had to make a concession for it, the opportunity revenue that wasn't earned by a withdrawal is huge. So when I look at this and say, if you could add 78 basis points back to your bottom line, would you like that? And the answer is yes. Would it make you profitable? And the answer is yes. And my question, Dave, for you is, why don't people do this?
Yeah, I don't know why we don't do a better job of measuring it. One, tell me if you agree with this, but like this funnel up here, this is like an iceberg. It's almost a reverse iceberg. This is even bigger opportunity up here. And I think it's about 3x. And at Trust Engine, we have a lot of visibility into just how many records a lender has in their CRM, or under, how many records they have and how many loans they're losing that they didn't even know about. And so, I mean, what's your guess on how big the iceberg is up here of, hey, this is what you're tracking through the loan manufacturing process, and you're losing too many loans, you're lacking conversion. And by the way, most loan officers, branch managers, they don't know in real time what the concession cost is by loan officer or what the conversion opportunity is. And then they're also not tracking, lost loans up here above the funnel. What's your guess, Jim, on how big of an opportunity above the funnel it is?
I think you've got it right there, David. It's likely 3 to 4 times above the funnel. So
ooh, I like 4. Let's go with 4.
Yeah. So the real opportunity then is there's so much money slipping through our fingers that ultimately better technique and better training and better tools would really help with. I thought, and I want to be sensitive to time, Dave, but I thought if we looked at this.
Hey, Jim, real quick, do you have a hard stop coming up? I mean, do I need to let you go, or can you go like 50? Okay, let's go a little over. I don't have a hard stop. This is so important that I want to take our time. Let me ask you, at Trust Engine, we've got a brand built around no borrower left behind, and we always say to folks that you're losing more loans than you're closing, either above the funnel and below the funnel. And if lenders started really tracking that, like the first bold executive decision is, let's scorecard that. Like let's have real-time scorecards, because loan officers are competitive. I mean, I don't know too many loan officers that don't want to be at the top of a list. Whether right now the big list is how many loans did they close, how many was the loan production volume. But if we started putting concessions in conversion, I think it would, most loan officers, by the way, if you're a loan officer, would you like that? If you would like it, please comment below. And if you wouldn't like it, why not? Why wouldn't you want to be scorecarded on that? Any thoughts on that, Jim?
Yeah, I think scorecarding is really good for 2 reasons. One, I always want to know where I want to stand. How good am I against my competition? And then secondly, if I scorecard and I look at where my score is and I begin to see why I'm not at the top, it may be because of concessions. It may be because of cures. It may be because pull-through is low. My batting average on pull-through is super important. In a group we looked at, Dave, I want you to guess, going back to Moneyball, if you wanted to pick a Hall of Fame originator, what would their batting average be from RESPA app to originated loan? Do you think 500 is good?
Well, I mean, at scale over time in this market, 26% is solid.
Yeah, there's actually some originators in our sample that hit 80% on this consistently over time, and there's some, and there's some that hit 12%. And my question is, what's the difference and why, and how can you work on it? The other thing I would say on this whole mortgage ball element is I asked Billy Bean when I finished, I said, Billy, got a question for you. Michael Lewis wrote a book in 2003, and he laid out exactly what you're doing. In fact, in the front of the book, the formula of how you compute your value to determine undervalued and overvalued and undervalued players is right there. Anybody could reproduce it. And then the movie comes out in 2011. And here we are in 2018 talking, and the Athletics still have the lowest cost per win over the 20 or so seasons that I examined and looking at the data. I said, why is that? Everybody knows what you're doing. Why don't they do it? And Billy said there's 3 reasons. First, the ability to have discipline and to get a system and use that system is not inherently in the nature of anybody. Discipline is a learned technique. Most people don't do discipline, and they don't like discipline. They want to do it their way. So if our view is against this pitcher, take the first pitch always because it'll improve your batting average and your chances of getting a hit. And someone says, no, I'm a slugger. If that pitch comes in here, I'm going to hit it. You will have no discipline, and you will be cut from the Athletics. The second is, in addition to discipline, it's consistency. You have to be consistent in applying everything. It doesn't mean you have the discipline to say, yeah, I'm going to do it, and then you do a half-baked job of doing it. You have the discipline to do it to the best of your ability every time you're at bat, whether it's in Major League Baseball or whether it's being a professional loan officer or being a professional operations person. So it's discipline, consistency, and lastly, it's the system. It won't always give you an American League championship, but more likely than not, you'll earn more championships in a given period of 10 or 15 years than you otherwise would at the lowest cost. So it doesn't mean you're going to have top producer, top profitability every month, but discipline, consistency, and believing in the system and using that tool will put you on top over the long run, help you develop a following that is relationship based, and that will be whether or not you make it to the Hall of Fame or not. So, David, I just wanted to share that story because I think it's so true of people in our industry. And I know we talked a little bit about some of the statistics of the improvements of margin within the folks that use the Trust Engine product, and also the adoption rate, which is not 100%. Maybe you could just share that.
Yeah, here, let me share my screen because I want to get your impressions on a few things as I go through this, because I mean, this is something that's, been near and dear to my heart for a long time. But all my professional career has been on what I call the advice revolution. I've always believed that a loan officer that delivers advice with price is not only giving a greater value to the consumer, but they're gonna have less concessions. They're gonna have greater conversion. But by the way, they're gonna enjoy their job a lot more. This is actually this month and last month I'm doing something called the MortgageCoach 10x strategy, and the lenders that participate, I'm making them scorecard things. So like this is actually one of the lenders that's a great client of ours in FM lending, and they looked at the 94 loan officers who, it says MortgageCoach because that's the platform of ours that they use, but you could just say that are doing advice-based selling. They're asking great questions. They're doing more than here's your rate, here's your payment, here's your cash to close, selling loans. They're helping consumers make advice-based decisions. So 95 loan officers are 65 basis points more profitable from a concession standpoint. That's $2,300 a loan. You know, that's an extra 465 loans year to date. And by the way, those same loan officers have a 10% higher conversion. And so one of the things that we're, you know, passionate about as a business is you know, going beyond CRMs. Like, hey, CRMs are great. And I'm not here to say anyone doesn't need a CRM, but they're not enough. Like if you really want to measure what's happening, you know, the rest of the world outside the mortgage industry, there's a category called performance marketing platforms that are data driven, you know, that are like, they're not just automating processes that VPs of marketing want to automate, and processes and journeys that loan officers want to process. It's data driven. It's like, oh, let's predict a consumer's needs, and then let's drive an educational experience to really help optimize. You know, so this is, you know, to me, to solve this problem, one of the things we're doing at Trust Engine, and why I love partnering with you, Jim, and I hope everyone listening to this reaches out to you, finds out, you know, one, the consulting services that you do, as well as the SaaS platform that you have to help them measure, is helping people measure this. Because here's the deal, guys. Like, we're building a borrower intelligence platform, but the industry, every lender needs to have this. Because here's another key concept: speed to need. You know, speed to lead is no longer enough to win in the market. You need to get to the need of the consumer. You need to be optimizing for success. Of course, we believe in coaching. You know, we think the best loan officers are coaches. You know, they're delivering advice. You know, it's not just a fee worksheet. You know, they're showing the consumer, hey, here's 2 points. Here's a loan with 1 point. Here's a loan with no points. And you know what? You can date the rate and marry the house, and you can refinance that house. Like, the loan officer that delivers this versus a fee worksheet is the loan officer that, you know, is playing Moneyball Mortgage. So any thoughts on that, Jim?
Absolutely, because particularly with the shape of the premium curve because of compression in the mortgage-backed securities, the difference of knowing when to use a point, for instance, and offer, you could pay a point, you could not pay a point, you could pay 1.5 points. That just shows the competence that you have of designing a loan product to help that client really understand what's in their best interest. And it's counterintuitive because people have been taught no points, blah, 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 but that's not always the answer. And that's just a very surface example, Dave. But, you know, it reminds me of another thing that in the book that you mentioned that I wrote, I looked at what happened in the commissioned securities market. In 1985, to buy 100 shares of IBM stock, it cost $450, and you went through a registered broker to do it. $450, 100 shares. And Merrill Lynch and Dean Witter and all the people were getting all these individuals coming in, getting sales training. They were cold calling. They were, hey, we got a great deal. You should buy this stock, blah, blah, blah. What happened is Schwab came in and said, no, $49 to trade 100 shares in 1995. And the race to the bottom started. And literally today, it costs nothing to trade the stock. But the commission-based industry of the brokerage and securities industry is gone. What do you have now? You have relationship sellers that are based and paid upon the value of the portfolio that they do. Some of the, Ken Fisher has an article, when you win, we win. If you do well, we do well. It's that whole value-based approach. And my guess is, if we adopt that value-based approach as an industry, the number of people that do extremely well will be highly, highly compensated. But it's going to squeeze a lot of people that are literally trying to sell stock like it was in 1985. Those days are rapidly coming to a conclusion.
Hey, Jim, let me get your opinion, and I almost want you to put on the devil's advocate hat. Like, I know you're going to agree with this, but let's face it, there's a lot of CEOs and heads of production. And I know, because every time I've ever given a presentation on our software, like, they're like, every loan officer should do this. If I was a loan officer, I would do this. And, every time I talk about speed to lead and speed to need, they're like, makes perfect sense. But here's where I want you to be the devil advocate. Still, most companies, when they run a credit report, this is something like this, a transactional experience is what's delivered to the consumer. And they allow that, hey, they're paying money to disclose the loan. And they know that if a loan officer delivers this, call it date the rate and marry the house experience, like, hey, here's an option, here's what it would be like if you refied. There's less concessions, there's better conversion. We also teach in this market that, hey, when you get grinded, like, hey, let's say someone's got a 0.5% better in rate, that, hey, put in, hey, here's my strategy, here's the credit union, and then dollarize that over the course of a year. Like, how much is that per year? Because what typical loan officers and lenders do is they negotiate in 1/8 in rate, which, let's face it, an 1/8 in rate, that's expensive. Let's just say it's 30 basis points. If you're negotiating $2,000 over the course of a year, because remember, they're going to be able to refinance out of this, so it's probably only going to last a year, maybe 2. You can negotiate like $500. Like, every C-suite I know is like, I want my loan officers doing this. We know that it'll be more profitable, they get better conversion, but they still let them do this. Like, what's the why? Why is leadership not, especially in this profit crisis that we're in, why are more people not playing Moneyball Mortgage, disclosing everything that we talk? Because you've rolled out your platform to clients. Like, why are lenders not showing extreme transparency, and why are they not being more aggressive at managing profitable best practices? What are your thoughts?
Dave, it really goes back to Billy's things about consistency, discipline, and the ability to say, we have to do this. That mortgage ball or money ball or whatever you want to call it, it takes a lot of effort, and it causes the need for people to modify the behavior. And frankly, CEOs have a lot of empathy in the mortgage banking business. Many of them started as originators. So they have empathy, and they don't necessarily like conflict. So if you have empathy and you don't like conflict, it's really easy to say, yeah, Dave, that's a good idea. Yeah, we'll give it to our people. And if they use it, I'm sure they'll all use it. Well, they won't. And we know they won't. You showed us the numbers, the number of people in terms of the total originators in that particular company. It looked like the adoption rate was 30%. So if you do not, as a CEO or senior production leader, insist that we have a standard of how we're going to deliver to customers, we have a standard of what we're going to do as professionals, and if you want to work here, you have to adopt that standard, then ultimately that company will probably not be successful over time. And you see it already. Just look at the headlines. Who got acquired last week? Who failed last week? Reason? Lack of discipline, lack of consistency, lack of a system. And it's my belief, and I know I will piss off a lot of people when I say this, is if you don't have the guts to really do this, you will lose this game. Guaranteed. And you don't have to like me, but please listen to that advice, because I think it's relevant. So
yeah,
I'll close on that, Dave.
Yeah, no, I think that was pretty bold. So first of all, guys, Jim and I are both, committed to this industry. We both love the industry. We love the people in the industry, and we both know there's a better way. Jim, anyone who wants to learn more about your solution, or they want to reach out and have a strategy session with you, what's the best way for people to connect with you and learn more about your measuring solutions to measure all this and your consulting?
Terraverde.com, TERAVERDE.com. Just there's a couple of places on there you can get in touch with me, or I'll gladly, David, I'll shoot you my email, and you're welcome to share it.
All right, guys, we'll put that email down below. I can also say at Trust Engine, we own MortgageCoach and Sales Boomerang, and we're building this borrower intelligence platform. And we're super committed to scorecarding, just call it the sales and marketing side of that. Like we want to make sure that, hey, you have a database. We're predicting who needs a loan. We're helping you measure conversion in real time. We're helping you measure concessions in real time. And then we're helping you drive that. But, what Jim's doing in terms of measuring the entire experience from sales and marketing through transaction, first of all, I hope people reach out to you. Guys, you can reach out to me at Dave at Trust Engine if you want to schedule a strategy session or just, talk shop around this. I'm going to be doing more interviews around Moneyball Mortgage. Actually, I won't say the event, but I'm going to be speaking at an event this month later on. And I'm trying to talk them into making it like it's time for Moneyball Mortgage. So you may see a headline on this at an upcoming event. And Jim, I really look forward to our next conversation. Anything else you want to make sure is said before we wrap?
I think really your advice to watch Moneyball is really good. There's a lot of managerial and a lot of personal lessons there. And Dave, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to speak with you. It's a pleasure to see what you're doing with Trust Engine, and great to be here. So thank you so much.
Hey, one last thing, everybody. There is a book y'all need to get. It's called Strategically Transforming the Mortgage Industry. I just bought 5 copies. I'm going to TMC next week. I'm going to have those with me. So I'm going to start passing out those books at events. Hopefully we'll drive some people through that conversation, and hopefully everybody got value here. If you aren't already following our YouTube channel, subscribe, give it a like, and Jim, I look forward to the next conversation. Take care, everybody.
Dave, thank you so much. Cheers. Take care, buddy. Bye.
Cheers.